Hi everybody, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Juan, I am just one reader, and I am here with another recent reads episode. Today I will be discussing books numbers 23, 24, and 25 that I have read in 2018. And those are Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything by Christopher Hitchens, and St. Lucy's Home for Girls Raised by Wolves by Karen Russell. So, let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte is a book that I wanted to read sort of as an introduction to my year of reading classics. I don't know why I decided that 2018 was going to be the year in which I finally get to read some classics that I've always wanted to read but never have read. So I started off with Jane Eyre, and I think it was a really great place to start. Really great introduction. You probably already know the premise or what this story is about. Basically, this is an example of a Bildungsroman, meaning a novel that follows a character's journey. It is actually written as an autobiography. So we follow the character of Jane as she's writing her own life story, and it's really interesting because we really get to meet her and really get to know her from the inside. Like, we really get into her mindset, the way that she thinks, the way that she works out the world that she's living in. That's pretty much the basic premise. I don't want to say anything else in case you don't know or you have not read it and you want to read it, because I think it could be very easily spoiled. Actually, I already knew the big plot twist in this novel. You probably know which one I mean. I already knew about that plot twist, and yeah, it was not really that great having that spoiled. It didn't really have a lot of, shock, surprise value, but, still I loved this book anyways. So on the positive side about this book, I thought the writing style was impeccable. Like, it is so elegant and clear and precise, and it's so accessible. I never thought that such a long classic novel, Victorian novel, could be so readable and so easy to read for a person like myself. Now, this novel actually takes its time, and that's something that I really appreciated. At first, it was kind of slow and it was kind of difficult to get into it. But once I got into it, I was just there. I was along for the ride, and for the last 300 pages, I could not stop reading. It was so fast paced in its own particular Victorian, elegant kind of way. Another positive is the use of characters, the use of setting. Everything serves the purpose of, creating this atmosphere that is very elegant and very kind of opulent and miserable at the same time. I don't know how to describe it. It feels decadent. It feels very wealthy, but at the same time incredibly dark and gothic, and I loved inhabiting this world, especially Thornfield Hall, which is the most important or the most prominent setting in the novel. Something else that I really liked is that there is a chapter or a couple of chapters in this novel towards the ending that are probably the most depressing chapters I have read in my life. These are chapters that really made me feel empty and hungry and cold and desolate and hopeless. And I loved that. I love it when an author can pull those strings and make me feel so much emotion and identify and relate to the character this much. Now, on the negative side, all I can say is that sometimes it felt a little bit too long and a little bit too descriptive. It didn't get on my nerves or affect my reading or anything, but sometimes I wished that we could just get to the point faster. And something else, like I said, this book takes its time. So for the first 200, 300 pages, I was finding it very slow. And then when I finally got along with it, and I felt like the actual story started, like it felt like Charlotte Bronte was kind of starting the engine. And once the engine was started, I was just there for the ride. So overall, I really liked this book. It was a really great introduction to my year of reading more classics, and I gave Jane Eyre 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was God is Not Great: How Religion Poisons Everything by Christopher Hitchens. And I love how cynical and direct the title is, because that is pretty much the writing style that runs throughout this nonfiction piece. It's just unapologetical, cynical, satirical, and it just cuts right through. And I personally really liked it. Now, this book is, like I said, it is nonfiction on the topic of atheism, and Christopher Hitchens attacks all religions, and not just religions, but the concept of religion and what religion is essentially. And he attacks it from a philosophical, sociological, psychological, historical, political standpoint. He pretty much addresses the issue in a very general way, but I thought it was a really great overview. So he really provides the reader with a lot of arguments about why religion is essentially not good. Now, on the positive side, I thought it was very funny, very satirical. There's a lot of humor. There were a lot of moments in which I was just having fun and having a blast and cracking up and laughing out loud. And I really enjoy it when a nonfiction book can make me feel like I am learning, but also having a blast. He also uses a lot of his own personal experiences, and he's had many. So I really felt a connection with him, with the author. Now, on the negative side, I do think that this book sometimes has a very harsh, direct writing style. It worked for me because I am a raging atheist myself, so I didn't have a problem with that, obviously. But I did feel like sometimes there was a slightly aggressive, not slightly, a very aggressive edge to his turn of phrase, which, it didn't bother me, but, for a nonfiction piece, it just feels like very aggressive and very, like it stings. It stings. But, it's not a negative exactly, but it could affect some people. Another negative another kind of issue that I had with this book is that sometimes I felt like he was talking a lot about history and a lot about, like, I really enjoyed how he discussed religion from a philosophical, psychological standpoint, and he addressed the issue magnificently. But then he just started talking about history in the Middle East and stuff, and it just started to get a little bit too boring. So it kind of felt like a little bit fragmented as a reading experience. Sometimes it would be very funny, and then the next chapter would be very dense with a lot of history and a lot of facts and timelines, and so the experience was a little bit chopped and jumbled. Now, I want to read you just a couple of quotes that, for me, summarized his arguments against religion. This is from page 205. There are indeed several ways in which religion is not just amoral, but positively immoral, and these faults and crimes are not to be found in the behavior of its adherents, but in its original precepts. These include presenting a false picture of the world to the innocent and the credulous, the doctrine of blood sacrifice, the doctrine of atonement, the doctrine of eternal reward and or punishment, and the imposition of impossible tasks and rules. And then this is probably my favorite quote from the book. It's from page 153. Thus, dear reader, if you have come this far and found your own faith undermined, as I hope, I am willing to say that to some extent I know what you're going through. There are days when I miss my old convictions as if they were an amputated limb. But in general, I feel better and no less radical, and you will feel better too, I guarantee, once you leave hold of the doctrinaire and allow your chainless mind to do its own thinking. So, really great book that I think everybody should read. but not everyone will read, sadly. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I read was Karen Russell's short story collection, St. Lucy's Home for Girls Raised by Wolves. And I don't really have a lot to say about it in here because it is a short story collection. I decided to read this because I had previously read and loved Karen Russell's novel Swamplandia, which is one of my favorite novels, period. And I had heard that this was an incredible collection, and it is a very good collection, but I didn't love it. I certainly didn't love it as much as Swamplandia or as some other collections that I really, really like far better than this one. This, I think if I had to summarize its themes or its common points, this takes place in a lot of really weird settings, like really strange places, scenarios, theme parks of impossible nature, characters that are kind of unrealistic, put in very unrealistic situations. Some of the stories are really, really great. There were a couple of stories that are still stuck in my mind. I think the title story is very good. There are probably around 3 or 4 really amazing stories in here, but the rest I found a little bit forgettable. I found they were okay, but nothing spectacular, nothing overly special, which, you know, that's the risk that you take with any collection. Overall, I thought this was incredibly creative, and I do really enjoy Karen Russell's writing style. She's very elegant and very whimsical and quirky and funny. And she manages to combine sadness and misery with joy and humor, which is something that I really enjoy in my literature. But I did find that there was not enough emotional connection, for me at least, while reading this book. Now, my favorite part of this entire book is on page 84. She invents a word. Karen Russell made up a word, and I thought this word was so great. The word is abracadabrical, which is abracadabra, but turned into adjective. And she says, Raffi has this magical abracadabrical ability to transform all his ifs into whens. So I love how she plays with language. Now, one more thing I want to say about this collection. I think it is impossible to not compare this book to Civil War Land in Bad Decline by George Saunders, which is another short story collection that revolves around theme parks and pretty much the same premises. I personally thought Civil War Land in Bad Decline was much, much superior to this. I think George Saunders does it better. I think he does it in a more human way, and his use of language is bolder and more, I would say, braver. And Karen Russell addresses the same issues in a very similar way, but her way is much more poetic and more lyrical. So you can read both of them. You can enjoy both of them, certainly. But I personally am on Team Saunders. But anyway, really liked it. I gave it 3.75 out of 5 stars. Guys, that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave your comments down below, and I will see you on the next video.